Hello,
everyone.
Great. We only have 15 minutes, so we should hop right into it.
Okay, for sure.
Lule, can you give us a little bit about your journey to this stage today? What led you to eToro and to DeFi?
Hello, everyone. So I'm originally from Ethiopia. I'm an immigrant through and through. Led to finance in general because immigrants do practical things, but really fell in love with it as a topic and as an empowerment center of everything that really was important about equity for me, which was that I think that there's impossible to achieve equity without ownership of capital. So finance really sort of gave me that venue to be able to do that, and really spent my career helping individuals access investing for that reason. And I came to eToro because I'm really bullish, even in this environment, in the power of what's happening in the DeFi space and in crypto in general.
I love it. As a child of immigrants, I relate with the practicality part.
Absolutely.
Can you give our audience a digestible definition? What is DeFi?
Yeah, so DeFi stands for essentially decentralized finance. And the general premise of it is, if you think about what happens in our financial lives today, it's governed between policy, right? You saw Jerome Powell today, right? Governed between policy and institutions that run that, right? So those institutions have several things they do. They can charge us fees. There's all sorts of things that happen that allow them to make profit. And there's nothing wrong to making profit, but ultimately what happens is things get a little too expensive, as well as access to those kinds of capital become difficult. So what DeFi does is essentially takes that power and puts it in code, and really takes that access to capital, reduces the cost of entry, and makes it possible for a farmer in Kuala Lumpur to be able to do things that he couldn't do a long time ago. And so we are in a mode right now where obviously the globe is figuring out what this technology means to it, but it is such an important technology, an important movement for the creation of equity in our society.
Look, DeFi and finance in general is a predominantly male environment. Can you tell us a little bit about the intersectional communities that are part of the DeFi movement?
Yeah. So, it's interesting because I often say this, and my team is here. Woohoo, hi, people. I often say this, and they've heard me say this like a broken record, which is like, I dare you to find me an asset class that is as well diversified in its ownership structure as crypto and digital assets in general. So if you look at that asset class, humongous percentage of consumers that are people of color, women, especially younger people. If you look at younger people, it's like 50+% of them actually own crypto over stocks, right? And so what you find is essentially this ability to embrace a technology that the owner of it, if you end up owning crypto, is the same person that benefits from the system. Which is not, it's actually a revolutionary idea when you think about it. Because when you own a stock, you own the revenue that comes from it, the profits that come from it. When you're in the DeFi world, you could be both a beneficiary of it as a person who's actually benefiting from it, whether you're business or otherwise, as well as an owner of it. So it's a really interesting perspective for people of color who kind of need access on both fronts, right? They need access in terms of ownership of capital, and they need access in terms of the way capital is made accessible to them. So that's why it's such an exciting space to be in, again, regardless of what we're living through right now.
It's important to remember that too. What kind of investing strategies and DeFi use cases are you seeing from these communities?
So a few ones. So sometimes it's, as I said, as simple as the fact that these smart contracts empower farmer-to-farmer transactions, right? A lot of times you might hear, if you have any immigrant family members or friends, they've moved to crypto as a mechanism of money transfer, right? Because it's so much more expensive using other means. I'm married to a Filipino woman, and her entire family circle uses crypto as a means of transactions, sending money remittances home, right? So there's some practical things that these coins have created that allow for the cost of distribution to go down, or the ability and the trust in it, right? Because in code you trust, right? Because it's not some central person deciding to raise rates or not. It is the system and the code that governs a lot of the rules around it. So that's a very prominent way. If you look at who owns crypto, Africa, they're like Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa are in the top 10 category of ownership of crypto, of people who own crypto. I mean, imagine an African continent of which 3 countries are the top 10 owners of this asset class, of individuals, right? So there is what it solves for from a currency perspective, there's ownership and what value it creates over time. And then lastly, it's about how it can power companies as well, right? So startups can have mechanisms for being able to do some of the money-to-money activities that don't involve large, expensive institutions. So there's a lot of use cases, which is why I think people are excited about this space. It's not solving one thing. It's a myriad of use cases, if you will, that it has the promise of solving. And I think that's a different mental framework than one thing that solves one particular innovation.
Right, and it's a real global equity conversation too.
Absolutely.
Which is, an incredible one to have,
Yep.
especially now. What is your vision for the future of DeFi communities as the utility of the tools grows?
So I think, I'm kind of nervous right now what the regulatory environment can do to chill the innovation. I think the innovation will happen no matter what. So whether it's here or it goes abroad, because as you know, innovation has no boundaries nowadays, I think it will continue to go. I do worry though, because I think smart regulation is a good thing, but it can also chill the effect of innovation and who comes to the table to be invited to that innovation. And my worry is that whenever you do that, the only people that lose out are the people that were not going to be able to have access in the first place. Because the rich will always be where they are, right? So I do worry about this intermediate step we're in terms of how the world grapples with a regulatory framework. But I think in the long run, I think this has so much promise in essentially decentralizing power. I mean, that's what it is, right? Money is power. Decentralizing power is a really sort of mind-blowing thing.
It is, and I'd like to actually take a second right there. When you talk about decentralizing power, you gave us the example before of your wife and her family, of farmers in Africa. Are there other examples like that you'd be able to share with folks that make it real?
I mean, some of it can feel like, whoa, too far off, but it's actually not as far off as you think because, so for example, let's say there's a particular neighborhood in Queens or in Brooklyn that feels like it wants to attract dollars into its neighborhood, right? So it can essentially one day, with this ability to access this kind of decentralized mechanism of coinage, of currency, it can say, if you spend money in our jurisdiction and we have currency that knows exactly when you're spending money in that jurisdiction, you'll get better rates, you'll get better tax levels, you'll get better, et cetera. So what it's giving is the rails, the technological rails for people to own their financial destiny. Not just people, but communities as well. So I could keep going on and on. Some of it can feel like it is a little trippy, but I think that, again, the technology is unbelievable. And if we are smart enough not to snuff it out, it can have really impactful change in our communities.
I love it. I could listen to you go on and on. I told you we should start a podcast. Are there any words?
I realized I'm speaking really fast too. The minute you said 15 minutes, I'm like, okay, sorry.
I do too. I'm really working on that. I get it. Are there any words that you'd like to leave us with, Lule?
I mean, I think the words I would leave you with are, it's not, to my mind's eye, everybody should come into this tent. It's not I'm not one of those people that believes that, because finance is not diverse, people of color will never come in. No, I'm often telling people of color and women, get in here before you're left out for another generation. So one thing I talk about is come in, get intellectually engaged, get physically engaged with it, tactily engaged. You learn by doing, right? Whether it's investing in it or transacting in it, get involved in the use of it. That's one thing I tell people. The second is, I can never leave a conversation without saying that investing comes in different hues. You don't have to just do one thing, right? eToro is a multi-asset platform that we do stocks and other things associated with it. So diversify, make sure you are an owner from the beginning. I have a lot of times young women and kids who come to me and say, what should I do? I just graduated from college. I'm like, did you just max out your 401k? No. Okay, don't talk to me then. Did you establish an IRA? No. I can't talk to you then, right? So this sort of the ABCs of establishing the rails for the accumulation of capital is also really important.
You talked about bringing everyone into the tent. I love that idea and I love that image. What is the first step folks take if they do their 401k and all of those rails and they set them up? So what's the first step then to come into that tent?
A lot of folks confuse the act of opening an account and funding with the actual act of just opening an account. I often tell people, like, if you don't have a dime to your name, establish them anyways. Because everything about investing is habit. And you have to start seeding the habit. So your first habit is take one friction point out. Open your 401k, open your IRA. Don't fund it, I don't care. Open your 529 for your kids, don't fund it. Eventually, somebody will have some dinner conversation with you, and you're like, oh, I should really fund that 401k. And then you'll put like $100 in it, for example, and then the habit of investing starts, right? So one of the things I tell people is like, break it down in incremental steps, because it's like everything else in life. You take one huge bite, and you'll never do it. So those are some of the tricks of the trade I share with people.
I love it. Thank you so much. I love this conversation today. And if you want to stay, and we'll continue having this conversation up on the roof with drinks. So if you have more questions, bring them. It's 2 flights up, and we'll see you there.
Thank you.